And just to introduce myself, before I hand over to Ailsa, our Swift guru and enthusiast, a kindred spirit as well. For those of you that don't know me, I am in a community as great as this. We all wear many hats. So I'm a school librarian at Hungerford School. I am also a nature writer. I've written for many, many years for the Newbury Weekly News, the RSPB, and I'm a Guardian country diarist, and also I'm the columnist, one of the columnists for Country Farm magazine, and I've written a book about the area and that sort of thing. But really, what I've done for all my life is be an activist for nature in lots of ways. I've done it in small ways, big ways. I put my body on the line. I've galvanised people as much as I can, but I would call myself an imperfect activist because it's impossible to do everything. And on that note, I must thank not only Ailsa for coming to our rescue and sort of galvanising us on this Swift Town project, but Penny Post, Hungerford Environmental Action Team and the Hungerford Hub, Andrea, because I was just going, I can't do all this, I can't do everything, and they've come to my rescue. And I think it's really important to say that I want this to be a community project. We have a fantastic community here, we really do, and I think we can all pull together on this really positive, joyful thing that we can do. It's an easy win in many ways. So just going to do a short introduction then, but Hungerford has been a Swift town since forever, since before we even knew it as a Swift town. But Swifts will be familiar to us even as a background summer noise for all of our summers, this wonderful fairground screaming that they do in these pelotons around the town hall and the church tower and over our schools. And that's for many towns, but that sound, that bird, that has been around for 65 million years, at least, is now coming up against huge problems. We're losing them. We're going to lose that sound. We're losing that bird. And of course it's our fault. It's the way, and we'll talk more about that. But we can take action for these birds to halt and maybe even reverse that decline. I wrote a big article for the RSPB, I think it was about 18 months ago, about swifts, and I was telling the students at Hungerford School, we've got a small eco club there, it's small but mighty, and I was telling them about it, and they were like, but we must be able to do something about these birds. And it was actually through them that this idea of Swift Town was born, because there are Swift cities, there are Swift streets. Why can't there be a Hungerford Swift Town? So I've got to thank them for their inspiration. A lot of them have now gone on to sixth form as well, and university even. But basically with the Swift Town project, we want you really to do 5 things. Very simple. And they are to be able to recognise what a swift is. Some of you already will be very familiar bird to you, but others might not be. They're easy to confuse with other birds. To record where those swifts are and note where they are, where they're nesting. They're only with us for a precious 3 months of the year. And when we know where they are, to look out for them, to protect them and their nesting sites, make room for them and celebrate them. So they're the sort of 5 things. We've very recently, thanks to Penny, set up a Hungerford Swift Facebook page where we're going to try and put all our information. The school, the students and our art teacher from last year has designed us a fantastic logo, because you've got to have a logo, it's a very good one. Yes, here we go, Swift Town Hungerford. And then next year what we're envisaging is when all the bunting comes down for Tutty Day, we'll have Swift flags. This is a bit of a dream at the moment, but why not? Why can't we have flags up along the street to welcome back our swifts and really sort of cement them in the community? So yeah, that's kind of where we're going with this, but do ask us any questions at the end. But in the meantime, I'm going to hand you over to Ailsa, an absolute expert on the swift.
Thank you, Nicola. Gosh, in that case, I better do a good job, hadn't I? I am just delighted to be here. I'm. Where do I start? I have loved birds since I was about knee-high to a house sparrow, and Swift has always been really special to me. You can probably tell from my accent already that I'm not from these parts. So I'm from Lancashire, but I have lived down here for a long time, and I'm still amazed when I pick up the phone and say hello. People say, "Oh, hello, Ailsa." How can they tell? I don't know. So I've lived and taught mainly in Reading for many years, and every school I've taught in, we've had a bird club, and we've always focused on the swifts. And when I retired, very young, obviously, I set up a little environmental education business called Ailsa's Walks and Talks, which does exactly what it says on the tin. I come and do talks, and I take people on walks, which is what we're going to do today. And one of my favourite talks is about swifts, and this is my Hungerford version of it. So thank you so much for inviting me to come and be part of the Hungerford Swift Town project. I think it's a brilliant idea, and it's going to be a huge success. I'm hoping that I'm going to add to what Nicola suggested about things you can do to help to make Hungerford a swift town, or even more of one than it already is. Easy, practical things that make it really doable and extremely enjoyable. So, what am I going to cover? Well, I'm going to tell you just why swifts are quite so scintillating. I'm going to talk about swifts being in peril, and then how we can help them. I love this photograph. This is a very young swift, and I can tell this because of the very pale edges to its feathers. Is my finger working?
I think sometimes.
It started, didn't it? Anyway, you can see very pale edges to the wings, to the feathers rather. And then when it molts its younger feathers out, it will be completely dark. Now, swifts look from a distance as if they're black, and that actually helps you to identify them. But we'll come to that in a minute, how you can distinguish between swallows, house martins, sand martins and swifts, because that's the ones that get confused. They're actually dark brown with a pale chin, but if you do see one with the edging, it's only a baby. Well, what's so special about swifts? Why do people like Nicola and I get all excited about them? The more I learn about swifts, and I learn something new every year, the more blown away by them I am. They are so other, so different, and so incredibly well adapted to their aerial lifestyle. And that's the first thing that I think is amazing about them. They do live in the air. The only time and the only reason that they touch down is to lay eggs and rear young. And that's it. They do everything else all the time, flying. Everything. Mating, sleeping, eating, drinking. It's amazing. The average lifespan of a swift is about 7 years, and it is estimated that in that 7 years, a swift will fly 2 million miles. 2 million miles. This is a small bird, and that's the equivalent of 4 times to the moon and back. And it's a little bird. I hope I'm selling them to you. They're also very fast. There's a bit of a clue in the name. If you are driving along on the motorway and there's a bird keeping up with you in level flight, then it's a swift. So their top speed that's been measured is 69.3 miles an hour. Now, I know none of you would speed on the motorway, so you know that bird is going to be a swift. They are fantastic travellers. All of that journeying backwards and forwards, and I'll show you in a minute where they go when they leave Britain. They have amazing meals. They eat insects and other small invertebrates. And you're probably thinking, but you've just said they're always in the sky, Ailsa. Where invertebrates and insects right up there? There's a really good biological term to describe all of these small invertebrates up there in the air, and it's this. It's called the aerial soup. So you know, well, I mean, you must have noticed it in your garden. We've got all these aphids, we've got tiny spiders, all sorts of little things. On a windy day like this, if they start to try to fly, the wind just blows them up. Where do they go? Into the aerial soup. Yum, say the swifts. So that's what they're eating up there. And they can hoover up thousands of insects at a time. Thousands. Especially when they've got young to feed. So they have amazing meals. They are very tidy nesters. There's a reason for that we'll come to. And so if you do have a swift nest box, you won't have to clean it out. If you have any other kind of bird nest box, like blue tick boxes, which a lot of us have, or robin boxes, the birds will be filling their boxes with lots of nice nesting material, and the babies will hatch out, and the parasites will move in. And then the babies leave, and the parasites settle down to go to sleep through the winter, or they've laid their eggs and there are larvae in all that nice nesting material. And if you leave it in the nest box through the winter, it'll all just be there dormant and quiet, and then the new family comes along, they lay their eggs, the babies hatch out, it's nice and warm and cosy, and all of those dormant parasites and larvae wake up and literally suck the babies to death. Yeah. So please, if you've got any other kind of nest box, please will you clean it out. If you clean it out in early autumn, it can then be used for birds to roost in the winter. And I can't quite remember the number, but it's an incredible one. Somebody from the British Trust for Ornithology was one day sitting having his lunch, and there was a blue tick nest box there, and it was February. No, it must have been having a very early breakfast, or just arriving at work. And he saw a wren come out of it. And then he saw another wren. And then he saw another wren. And it was something crazy, like about 60 wrens came out of this nest box, where they'd all scrunched up together to keep each other warm. So if you keep your nest boxes nice and clean, you'll be able to help all sorts of birds. You don't need to do that with swifts because they don't make nests, well, barely. And they also eat their baby's poo, so they keep it nice and tidy, which is very sensible, really, if you're going to be nesting in a dark hole. And it's thought that some of the goodness, the nutrients that have actually gone straight through the babies, the adults can then absorb. So it's not just tidying up, it's keeping healthy too. Please don't try this at home. They can sleep with half their brain at a time. So to sleep, they fly to about 10,000 feet. So just 10,000. And while they're up there, they slow down. So they're only flying at about 25 miles an hour. She said only. And they can close off one side of their brains and let that rest, so they don't fly into any other swifts. Of course, for most of their evolution, there hasn't been anything else up there at that height flying around, but now we've got aeroplanes and things like that that get in the way. And when that side of the brain is rested, they can rest that side. How useful would that be? And look, they're beautiful. They are stunning. With those long swept back wings, their flight is phenomenal. They are graceful, agile, fast, and they have this gorgeous call. When I hear this, it's summer. Oh, it's not a word, summer. Oh, it does. They sound better than that. So, there we are. What's special about this? Now, I know it's really difficult to tell these birds apart, and it's one of the first things that a lot of people say to me, well, Ailsa, how do I know which is which? Well, I'm going to give you a few handy hints and topical tips. Over on the table, just where you came in, there are just some sheets with pictures of 3 birds on, and I photocopied a few of those. So if you want to take one of those with you and stick it up on your kitchen wall or your door, and if you see one of these birds, you can go, oh, that's like that, oh, it's a swallow, like that. So it'll help you to learn which is which. Let's start then with the house martin, which is this one here up in the top left-hand corner. It's actually dark blue. Now remember, our swift looks black, although it's dark brown, but let's go with black. It's dark blue and it has a white rump and it's white underneath. And it's called a house martin because it's, through history, nested on houses. So it's a relatively urban bird, but actually so is a swift. But it's quite a different colour, quite a different shape, and it sounds like this. No screaming. Then there's the swallow, which is the one over there at the top near Nicola. The swallow, I think the first thing I notice about a swallow is its long, thin tail streamers, we call them. They're longer on a male than a female, and the babies don't have them at all. But that's all right, because by the end of the summer, when the babies are around, you'll have worked out what a swift is. In fact, the swifts will have gone by then. The swallow is all white underneath, and it's got a lovely red chin. And its full name really is barn swallow. And again, there's a clue in the name about where you're going to see swallows. They like to nest in barns, open farm buildings that they can get in and out of really easily. Incidentally, they also nest inside West Kennet Long Barrow. How wonderful is that? So you can be standing there, you know, feeling the ancestor vibes, and this swallow goes, and all the babies go, it's lovely. Anyway, swallows, barn swallows. So barns, think farms, think fields. So you won't find swallows hunting over Hungerford. You'll find them on Freeman's Marsh, which I've just seen. They are birds of open countryside. So they like the sorts of insects that you get over fields, not inside woodlands, but open spaces, okay? And they twitter like this. Okay, now, then we've got the sand martin down here. And again, the clue is in the name. Sand. These are brown, the colour of sand, and they make their nests in sand. Well, not at the beach. They will dig a burrow in a sandy riverbank. Unfortunately, there aren't many sandy riverbanks left because we're straightening all of our rivers out to help with the flooding. I don't know why we straightened all the rivers out. So you might go somewhere where you'll see some artificial holes. So I'm thinking of the Nature Discovery Centre at Thatcham. If you sit outside the cafe there and you're having your cup of tea, just across there on the island is a box on legs with loads of circular holes in. Behind those holes are little tunnels lined with sand, and that's where the sand martins come to nest. There's one at Lavell's Lake in Reading. I think probably the NDC is the nearest one to Hungerford, but I'm happy to be put right on that. So sand martins, they're brown, they're white underneath, they've got that rather nice little collar, and they always sound a bit frantic to me. It's not so twittery, is it, as the others? Now, the house martin, the swallow and the sand martin are all related. They are cousins of each other. They're in the same family. The swift is in a completely different family. It's got nothing to do with them. But they do all come back to us from Africa in the spring and stay for part of the summer. The sand martins come first, and then the house martins and the swallows. The swifts don't come here until the late April, the beginning of May. The martins and the swallows will leave, it could even be late September, but the swifts leave at the end of July. So we've only got this month left. They're only here for 3 months. And in that time, they're going to raise their young, get them ready to take themselves off to Africa independently, and to delight us for 3 months. Of course, there are always exceptions to the rules, as you'll find out. But there we are. So, fairly urban house martin, white and blue, twitters, swallow, farms, long tail streamers, white underneath, sand martin, sandy places, swift. They are urban birds, but again, I'll say more of that in a minute. And that's the swift's call again. So when you look them up in a book, it'll say, okay, its wingspan is 18 inches or 45 centimetres, da-di-da. I can't envisage numbers like that. I'm not really good at numbers, so I made one. Okay, this is a life-size swift. It's not very big, is it? 4 times to the moon and back. Fancy that. And look how long its wings are in proportion to its body. Very, in other words. And that's because of its aerial lifestyle. And they weigh the same as 10 teaspoons of sugar. Well, this is 10 teaspoons of sugar, carefully measured out in my kitchen. I'm going to give it to Andrea. Does that feel heavy, Andrea? No. Of course, birds are very light. If they were heavier, they wouldn't be able to fly, which is why they don't have teeth and why they have hollow bones. If you break open a bird's bone, please don't. It looks like an aero bar inside, so it's made. The bones are not solid. They're a sort of lattice work of crisscross with lots of hair in between. So there we are. There's our swift. Doesn't weigh much. Has got very long legs. Now, its Latin name is Apus apus, which, as those Latin scholars amongst us will know, means no feet. No feet. Well, it does have feet. Can you see just down? Oh, sorry, I'm so used to using my gizmo. Little tiny feet here. But look at the robin's feet in comparison. Now, I want you to do a little bit of audience participation here, and everybody's involved. You just need your hands. You're going to be a robin, okay? So, can you use a finger to be a twig or small branch? Yeah? The other hand, now all birds have got 4 toes, so you're going to have to ignore one of your fingers, but you do need your thumb. All right, so imagine you've only got, I did this with an audience once, and there was a man on the front row who said, I can do it. He'd chopped one of his fingers off in an accident. Oh, sorry, Mike. Perfect. Anyway, so there we are. If you were a robin, you could then fly down, 3 of your toes face forward. So you wrap those around the twig. Your 4th toe is at the back, and it comes round and locks there. And you've got a tendon about there, which locks into place so that when you're perched and it's a windy day, you don't get blown out of the tree. Isn't that brilliant? Evolution. Wonderful thing. It's all right, you can stop being robins for a minute now. Swifts cannot do that. They've got 4 toes, but 2 point forward and 2 point backwards. And they can't perch on anything because their toes are too small and their legs are really weak. They don't need to be long toes. It doesn't need strong legs. It doesn't use them. It spends 95% of its life doing this. You don't need big feet for that. You need small feet so they don't hold you back or weigh you down. So they've got very small feet, hence the apus apus. But this does cause problems for them if they are grounded. So it's okay if they fly into their nest site. They can shuffle about a bit and cope and then get to the entrance, launch themselves and then fly. But if they land on the ground, they are in serious trouble. They cannot take off. They can't run along. They can't flap their wings. They're going to, well, the end is nigh, really. Now, if you find a grounded swift, although I was talking to a lady on the front row who was telling me that she did what you're absolutely advised not to do. If you find a grounded swift, and you think it doesn't look injured, you know, it hasn't got a droopy wing, or it's not bleeding, or it hasn't got feathers sticking out everywhere, the advice is to pick it up very carefully, hold it on your hands, lift your hands and wait for it to fly. Don't do that, because the likelihood is you'll do that and it'll do that, splat, and then you will have injured it even more. So just wait for it to go, and hopefully this will happen. Now, looking after injured swifts is a highly specialist business. I couldn't do it, I wouldn't even try. They are extremely fussy, extremely difficult to look after. But there are lots of talented people around the country who love swifts and who have been trained to look after them if you find an injured one. And there's a brilliant organisation who've got a website, it's called Swift Conservation. And on their website, there's a great long list of all the swift carers across the UK. Now, I don't know where your nearest one is. As I said, I live in Reading now. My nearest one is in Blueberry, and they do a brilliant job. So over again, on the table over there, I've made some little flyers like this with some useful addresses on, and Swift Conservation is on there. But hot off the press, there's a new address missing from this, because if you do take one of these, can you add to it Facebook, Hungerford Swifts? It was born yesterday, was it, Penny?
Swift Town, Hungerford.
Swift Town, Hungerford. So we've got a Facebook page, Swift Town, Hungerford, which I would have put on there, but it's so fresh and new. Well, where do they go when they leave us, and where do they come from? Well, they overwinter right down here in equatorial Africa, sort of across the Congo really, and further south. But if you have a look at where they're going to and what their journey is going to be like, you'll get an idea of some of the threats that they're having to cope with nowadays. So there's massive amounts of deforestation going on in the Congo, and that means loss of habitat and loss of insect food. And of course, I'm sure we've all heard about the increasing desertification of the Sahara, again because of human pressure on habitats. So it's getting harder and harder for the swifts to migrate safely. Let's have a closer look at a swift. And I'm thinking here about the adaptations that have developed over millions of years of evolution to help it to do the best it can at being a swift. It has a tiny beak. It doesn't need a big beak. It's not going to go probing into the ground like a blackbird or a curlew to try and get food. It's not going to be cracking nuts open like a nuthatch. It just needs a tiny beak, but it can open its mouth really wide. And this is really useful because when it's got babies and it's gone off hunting and it comes back with about, 10,000 insects in its, I'll show you in a minute, in its throat pouch, what the baby does is it opens its mouth really, really wide. So that's a really useful adaptation for the baby to have. And the parent can then put its head right inside the baby's mouth and feed it. Something else not to try at home. Who remembers the 2012 Olympics? 2012, weren't they exciting? We won all the cycling, didn't we? One of the reasons why we were so successful in the cycling events was the new style helmets that people like Chris Boardman wore. I sound as though I know all about cycling, don't I? This is just because they were like Swift's heads. So they were really swept back with deep grooves on the edges to help with the aerodynamic flow. And that's exactly what the Swift has got. They have big eyes, they need to be able to see really well up there. In the corner of the eye, they've got quite stiff, bristly eyelashes. And that's because when you're flying through the aerial soup, you're likely to get aerial soup in your eyes. So that the bristles stop it all going in your eyes. And they can also be moved to work like sunglasses. It's quite bright up there. What else have we got? Oh, claws. Can you see the claws on its little toes? Really quite big. So swifts can, although they can't walk, they can cling to vertical surfaces. And back in the day before people arrived and built houses, which were really great for swifts to nest in, they would have nested in cliffs and they would have nested in hollow trees. And some swifts still do that in some parts of the country. The other thing that the claws are really useful for is fighting. So if there's a pair of swifts in a nest site, or even just one, and an intruding swift comes, they'll have a fight. And it's really like that. And sometimes they lock their talons to their talons, lock their claws together, and they'll sort of hang there or sit there for about 3 hours, who's going to weaken first. So they're useful too. Okay, here's a parent who's been hunting for insects for its baby, and you can you can see it's got this big bulge, and that's its special throat pouch which it stores the insects in. It's been flying up there in the aerial soup, it's come back with thousands of insects in there, and that's what it's now going to deliver to the babies. Baby swifts can get up to 40 feeds a day, and it's estimated that through those 40 feeds being done by both parents, they can get 20,000 insects. 20,000 insects in a day. It can be quite hard to catch insects if the weather's cold and if it's raining. Swifts don't like rain. So they will, if it's raining, they'll fly round a weather system and they'll go and hunt somewhere else, and it could take them 500 miles away. That's nothing to a swift, but it is to the baby swifts. So what baby swifts have evolved to be able to do is really unusual. They can put themselves into a state of torpor. So it's a bit like hibernation. Everything slows down, and they do not need to eat. Now, if you were to leave a baby robin for, just a few hours without feeding it and without sitting on it to keep it warm, that baby robin would die. Baby swifts can survive for 3 days. And it is because the adults might have to fly so far to get food. They drink by scooping water up off the surface of lakes and rivers, and they can actually bathe by flying through gentle rain. They don't mind a bit of gentle rain, but you know what it's like in Britain sometimes. So that big gape that you can see in that picture helps them to scoop up the water. As I said earlier, their nests are fairly fundamental, and this is because they can't collect nesting material because they can't perch and they can't walk. So anything you find in a swift's nest, they've caught as it's been floating around. So this one's been quite clever. It's got a bit of baler twine or something that was obviously blowing around on a day like this. Yay, nesting material. Yay, take it back. There's a few feathers. That for a nest is quite a complex nest. So I'm reckoning that it's been used for several years. Swifts are what we call site faithful. They will go back to the same nest site year after year. If they can't access that site because we filled it in because we're insulating our houses, they probably won't breed again, which is deadly serious when we're losing so many. So they catch bits and bobs and they stick them together with saliva, spit. And of course their cousins who live in the Far East, they make their whole nest out of spit. And then people come along, and after the nests have been used for the babies and are probably really quite dirty, the nests are taken down and they're made into soup. Tasty. Please don't eat bird's nest soup if you go on holiday. So as I said, they eat their baby's poo, so then that keeps the nest clean. They'll have usually one brood in a year. They lay 2 or 3 eggs, and incubation, so they're sitting on the egg waiting for it to hatch, can take between 19 and 25 days. That's quite a big range, and that's because if the weather's bad, they might have had to go and fly somewhere else, and so the babies have gone into torpor. So between 19 and 25 days. And if I tell you that a robin, their incubation period is between 12 and 14 days. Really short time. One of the reasons for that is that the baby robins can then leave the nest and be looked after by their parents. That doesn't happen with swifts. Once the baby swift leaves the nest, it goes to Africa. Bye, mum and dad, never sees them again. They have to be completely independent. So they have to be really well developed. And the fledging is similarly a long time for a robin. After, when it's ready to leave the nest and then be independent, takes between 9 and 16 days. For a swift to fledge completely so as it can leave the nest box, it's going to take between 5 and 8 weeks. 5 and 8 weeks. So this is a massive, massive commitment from the parents. It's exhausting for them, but the fact that the young can go into torpor does help them because it literally gives them a break. Now, if you can see a nest, it is not a swift nest unless it's it's in a swift box. Swifts nest in hidden places. Their favourite places to nest are spaces underneath roofs, whereas the swallows, as we already know, like nesting in barns, so they make this open nest out of mud and moss and feathers and bits of straw, and they balance it on a beam, and it's easy for the parents to get in and out to feed the babies. Over there in the top corner there's a house martin. Do you remember, those of you who are of a certain age like what I am, we used to see the house martins swooping down to puddles and collecting little blobs of mud, and they'd stick them on the house and stick them just underneath the roof, and there'd be a cup-shaped nest with a little dent in like that, and the babies would be inside it. You'd see their little heads poking out. I'm afraid these are a thing of the past in most places. house martin numbers have crashed as well, and one of the reasons is that we are using a lot of plastic in our houses, and where the house martins used to stick their nests onto bits of cement and wood, which worked, you can't stick mud onto plastic, so they can't make their nests. So in some places, artificial nests like these ones here are being used. Now, I have got good news from down the road. At the Bear, now this is a terrible photograph, but I did a little recce last week, and I saw these twittering house martins, and I thought, where are they coming from? So along here, oh, it is terrible, there's a nest there, and there's another one there, and they are proper nests, they're not artificial. But I couldn't go any closer because there was a bit of a wedding party going on. And I'm striding along, you know, with me, what my daughter-in-law calls my hardcore birding hat on, and my binoculars. And they're having their wedding, and they're sort of looking at me like this. So I'm sorry it's not a very good photograph. But great to have house martin nest in Hungerford. And then there's a very nice house as you come back from the Bear up the main road. You go over the bridge, and there's a nice house on the left. I think it might be called Bridge House, and it has 4 artificial house martin nests on, and they are being used as well. So thumbs up to Hungerford. Obviously potential for lots more, as well as swifts. Okay, so it's lovely to know that you're already helping. And it's absolutely fantastic to have our swifts swooping around, and when they go up to their 10,000 feet, they can actually see for miles and miles and miles, and they can see the weather systems coming in. So they know if it's going to be awful weather, and they're going to have to go and look for food, you know, hundreds of miles away. Last year we had some terrible weather in midsummer, and our swifts disappeared. People were saying, what's happened to the swifts? And then in the Netherlands, the ornithologists there were reporting thousands of swifts appearing. So they just nipped across the North Sea till the weather got better. It's awesome, isn't it? Fancy being able to do that. Swifts are scintillatingly fantastic, but they are also in deep and serious trouble. The RSPB's latest figures, and this only goes up to 2018, is that in the last 25 years their population has gone down by 57%. It's more than that now. The main reasons are that they have nowhere to nest, because a lot of the old buildings that they would have nested in are being demolished, and those buildings and even more modern buildings are being refurbished and insulated. Of course they are. I mean, look at our energy bills. Of course we've got to insulate our homes, but this means filling in all those little gaps that there would have been on older buildings between the walls and the roofs. Little gaps were left to help with ventilation, and the Swiss made use of that, and they just zip in. They only need a tiny space to get into, as long as there's enough of a cavity behind for them to nest in. That is where they have nested for centuries. There are records of them nesting in writing from ancient Rome. I think that's lovely. Can you imagine Catullus or somebody there? Penning a bit of philosophy. Oh, those swifts are back again. And of course there's also this massive decline in the insect and general invertebrate populations. And as we know, swifts need a lot of insects for themselves and for their babies. So that's another big issue. What can we do to help? Well, please don't use pesticides in your gardens. There are at least 22 million gardens in the UK, and just think, if we all stopped using pesticides, how many more insects there would be? Easy. I'm not suggesting you need an aeroplane to spray your gardens, but you get the idea. And also by letting the native wildflowers in your garden grow, you're going to be encouraging lots and lots of pollinators. Now, I don't know if anybody takes part in Plant Life's No Mow May project. Yes, good. I'm glad to hear it. So Plant Life, a big plant charity, a few years ago suggested that if we didn't cut our grass just in May, we would be able to see a difference in what was coming up, and that it would give a chance for our native wildflowers to grow and to flower and to feed the pollinators. So this is my front garden. This was our first no-mow May, and look, I had a forest of, it's mainly cats here, I think. Absolutely brilliant, and it was just buzzing with insects, absolutely lovely. So I do no-mow May every year now, and it's now spread into something called Let It Bloom June. So the two photographs on the right there are last month, the yellow rattle in the middle. This is an amazing plant. Yellow rattle, it's called the meadow maker. It's parasitic on grass roots. So if you grow yellow rattle, but you still want some grass, and grass is good, quite a few insects need grass, and it's interesting and beautiful as well. But the yellow rattle will just stop it going whoosh. It'll just, tame it down a little bit, so you're not going to get taken over. After Let It Bloom June, here we are in, I don't know if this is the official name, but I like Thigh High July. So that's what I'm going for. And really interestingly, I had over my front garden through quite a lot of June a pipistrelle bat that would come every evening at about the same time. And there's a tree in that garden, and there's a tree in that garden, and this little pip would just fly backwards and forwards over my garden eating insects. Because I was doing, I'm sure it's because I was doing no-mow May. So please, give it a go. So, nest sites. As I was saying, because we're insulating our houses, a lot of our houses look like this now. This is all plastic underneath there, not a gap left. It's quite a busy line, isn't it? And that's on a Sunday. But in a building like these, there would have been loads of spaces there. Also, probably some tiles that were just, you leave it up a little bit, which Swift could get into. Everything's neat and tidy here. And then we've got the older buildings. So this is Tate North in Liverpool, and these are old warehouses. There would have been thousands of Swifts nesting in those roof spaces. Even up to, I suppose, when it was renovated about 20 years ago. What happened to those spaces when it was renovated, I don't know. I'm hoping that they weren't all filled in and that somebody with a bit of sense and knowledge about Swifts came along and said, no, we've got to leave gaps. And maybe that's a bit of research I could do, or one of us could do. So gaps in roof spaces is what they like best. These tiles, which were invented by the ancient Romans, and you find lots of them throughout the Mediterranean, are perfect. You've got a nice little arched entranceway to your nest space. And isn't that nice? But old and new houses can be useful both. So here we are, this is in Norfolk, and there were Swiss nesting under the tiles here. Here's a nice new house in Salisbury. But there's a bit of masonry has fallen out here, just up there. And the Swiss nest there. And you might be wondering, why are you showing us these buildings, Ailsa? Well, there's a common theme here. This is where my sons live. Tom lives in Norfolk, that's their house. Simon lives in that house. They moved into the houses and they had Swifts. I've been trying for years. I'm really pleased for them. But just a bit green-eyed as well. And as I said, before people were building houses that gave Swifts nice, easy homes, they would have nested in other places, such as cliffs. This is Old Hunstanton in North Norfolk, and there are Swifts nesting in the cliffs there. It's really exciting watching them come in and out. There are places in Scotland where trees are big enough and old enough to have spaces in for Swifts to nest in. So some in the Abernethy Forest, there's a few nests there. Lots of Swedish Swifts nest in forests, nest in hollow trees. These are my Swift nest boxes where Swifts haven't nested yet, but I am not giving up. So we started off. This is Simon, who now lives in Salisbury. We started off with those two. If anybody's come across lately stories about a wonderful man called John Stimpson, who has made thousands and thousands and thousands of nest boxes, I'm proud to say these are original Stimpsons. Lovely man. He retired from one of the seed companies where he was the first person to design seed packets with coloured pictures on. What a revolution. You just think they're normal now, don't you? But no, he came up with the idea. And when he retired, somebody said to him, "Oh, John, you're always making things. Can you make me a couple of Swift nest boxes?" So he said, "Yeah, all right." Anyway, I don't know, is it something like 35,000 now he's made or something? Incredible. When you have Swift nest boxes, there are a few things that you have to take into account. One of them is height. So the recommendation is they be at least 5 metres up, so that the swifts can get to them here. So when a swift comes into its nest, it usually does that. So it needs a bit of swoop space, and that also, the height also keeps it away from predators. They need clear access. So if you've got telegraph wires or a big tree, and the swift, especially when the babies come out, they've got to be able to come out and fly out straight away. They can't do that and fly around a tree, or do that and fly over a house. So you need clear access. And ideally, they will go on north or east facing walls because they get less hot in summer. So obviously you get more sunshine on the wall if it's facing south or west. My wall, and it's the only wall I can use in my house, faces west, but the house next door, which isn't too close, casts a bit of shadow. But just in case, to keep them cooler, we painted them white. So there we are, put those up. The other thing that you can do to encourage the swifts, because swifts like to nest with other swifts, they're quite colonial. So if they hear swifts, they think, "Oh, good, more swifts. This is going to be a good place to nest. Let's go there." So you cheat a bit. I don't believe in cheating, but I think this is forgivable. You play swift calls, okay, and you can. Swift Conservation will sell you a CD if, like me, you're a little bit in, old technology is easier. Or you can download Swift calls and you can play them on things like a Bluetooth speaker, and it works. You will attract swifts. I have attracted swifts to my nest boxes, they just haven't got in yet. And then, so you can see Simon standing there, and I'm saying 5 metres up. He's on a flat roof. So he climbed out of the bedroom window, went round, put the nest boxes up, and then each spring we would put old socks in the entrance holes because they're nice and squidgy, and you've always got old socks, and that stops the sparrows getting in. Only one year, it was 2020 when we were all a bit distracted, weren't we then? We forgot to put the socks in, and the house sparrows moved in. So I now have house sparrows in my Stimson boxes, and I can't chuck them out because they're lovely and they are in desperate need of help as well. So the house sparrows have moved in. So this year I thought, right, I'll get some more. I got some more. There they are, beautiful, painted white. Simon doesn't live with me anymore. It's most inconvenient. So I've lost me techie, and I've lost my climber out of windows tall person. But somebody in Tilehurst got in touch with me and said, "Ailsa, we'd like to put swift nest boxes up. Can you give us some advice?" So I went and had coffee and cake, and it was lovely. Gave them advice, and they said, "Well, we'll find somebody who'll put them up for us." And then they got in touch and said, "We're having our gutters fixed, and Richard, who's doing it, is really interested in swifts, and he said he'll put our boxes up for us. Can you come and supervise?" So I did, and it just so happened that I said, "Oh, Richard." Hang on. Would you like to come and clean my gutters and put swift nest boxes up? So we did. So this is going to be, I'm not quite sure if we've got as far as thinking about how are we going to source swift nest boxes and how are we going to put them up. You can buy them from all sorts of places. So the RSPB does a very nice one, but it is quite expensive. John Stimson, of course. But go on the Swift Conservation website and they will give you advice about it. If you fancy making some, and they're not that hard, she said, I don't know, but they look easy. Again, on my useful addresses, there is Bristol Swifts. And Bristol Swifts is run by a guy called Mark, whose house is covered, it's festooned with different designs of swift nest boxes. Because there are different designs. Mine, you've got to fly in at the front and then turn right. Some boxes have got the hole underneath, so the birds just come straight up and in and then churn. And some birds seem to prefer some and some others. I think the best thing to do is to have a variety. But what Mark has done at Bristol Swifts is the design and the instructions about how to make all these different boxes are on his website. So, what fun is that going to be? And also, you've got no excuse. Inside the box, at the far end away from the hole, will be a little, it's like a saucer. I think mine are made out of MDF, and they're square with a little hollow in. It's called a nest form, and is there for the swifts to lay their eggs in, so that the eggs aren't going to go rolling around the box. Remember, they don't really have a nest. There's nothing to stop the eggs from moving. So if they lay them in this little saucery thing, they are more likely to be secure. Let's put it that way. You could also put swift bricks into your house, or if you're involved in any new building, incorporate swift bricks. And they're as simple as they sound. They are the size of a normal brick. They've got a hole in, and you can see some babies peeping out of that one. And there's space in there for the adults to make their nest, bring up the babies. They're not going to rot. They won't need replacing. They'll be there forever. In November last year, you may have seen an amazingly, beautifully brave young woman called Hannah Bourne-Taylor, giving a speech, which she called the Feather Speech, at Parliament in London in November. She was body painted, and that's all she had on. It's November. Oh, I felt for her, I really did. Oh, brave girl. And she did this to draw people's attention to swifts needing help. So she was decorated in swifts. I think she had some underwear. It wouldn't have been enough to keep her warm.
She had lovely long hair.
And she had very long hair. She did, yes. And let's face it, some of us would look better in that get-up than others. So she then launched a petition, and what she's trying to get through Parliament is that all new build houses should incorporate nest bricks. This is not hard. Nest bricks have come a long way since they were first suggested, and there are several of the big development building companies that actually automatically now incorporate nest bricks. So we're part of the way there. Parliament is voting on this on July the 10th. So if you've got a spare 5 minutes, make a spare 5 minutes, write to your MP and say, yay, this is fantastic, we're going to make Hungerford into a swift town. Who is your MP?
Laura Farris.
I've just done this. So
Oh.
if you can easily search Hannah Bourne-Taylor, it's hyphenated. Just search her name, and the Swift petition will come up. She will get in touch with her, and she will email you a letter if you want to do it that way, or just email Laura Farris as I've done, and I've just said this is what we're doing. Please stand up for the petition, so that Swift bricks are part of all new house or building developments. Yeah.
Maybe when we have another get-together, we could invite her to join us.
She would. She's lovely.
Yeah.
Yes, we would have a wave time.
Yes, good, right, all right, well, that's on the list. So swift bricks as well. If playing with swift calls, you can use something as tiny, this is, I'm going to sound as though I know what I'm talking about here. This is my Bluetooth speaker. Next to one of my mugs, and look, on the mug, it says Swift. And you can see how tiny the speaker is, so it's not going to be obtrusive, but do mention to the neighbours that you're going to be playing these calls. There's huge debate about, do you do it just at dawn, do you do it at dusk, do you do it every hour, do you leave it on all day? I've tended to put mine on when I see swifts coming over and hear them calling, and that's usually about 9 in the morning and 9 at night. But yeah, it's up to you and your neighbours. You can leave them on all the time if you like. And what you're hoping is going to happen when you're playing your swift calls, is you're going to get some of these young birds. So swifts don't breed until they're sort of 3 or 4 years old. And don't forget, for those 3 or 4 years, they're just flying. That's it, they never land in those years. And then they'll breed and lay their eggs. They breed on the wing as well. But when they're young birds, they will spend, they still come back to Britain. They come back a bit later than the breeding adults. And they're here, they're feeding. And around this time of the year, they start prospecting for a nice property. And what they will do, and you may have heard them doing this already, they get together in gangs and they scream around. You were mentioning this, weren't you? We call them screaming parties. And they scream around and they go really close to buildings. What they're doing is looking for a cavity in a building. And this is just incredible. The theory is that they then fly and they brush their wing against the cavity. And that they can tell from the sound that is then made how deep that cavity is and if it's viable as a nest site. And when they do that, we call them, this is really technical, bangers. Because they've banged against the cavity. Isn't that incredible? That's happening now. And here's two who are flying along to see if they can find somewhere good to nest. Well, what goes on inside the nest box? I don't have cameras in mine, but a friend of mine does. And she had the most amazing experience 2 years ago. And she lives in, I think in Berkeley. There were no swifts in the village, but they really wanted to attract them. They'd been to one of my talks at Newby Museum and were inspired. So they got some nest boxes, put them up, they played the swift calls and thought, 3 years down the line. And then in July, 2 swifts came and moved into one of the boxes. In July, they're supposed to fly back to Africa in July. There they are. So they settle down. You can see the nest form there. You can also see how long their wings are. It's really difficult for them to fit into these spaces, but they do it. So it was really late in the season, and Claire didn't expect anything to happen, really. And then she got this shot. Look, one of them's got some nesting material. Hurrah! I've got a feather. Oh, so, yeah, that's all very good. And then they laid 2 eggs. They should have been flying back to Africa by now. And it looked like they were probably, this was the first year that they were nesting and they hadn't quite got the hang of it. So there's me saying, you won't get anything nesting in your nest box for at least 3 or 4 years. It could be 8 or 10. You've just got to be patient. Hang on in there. I say to myself every year. But look, Claire, first year. So there they are, the eggs. Yay, fantastic. We're all very pleased. Notice that they're white. They don't need to be camouflaged because swifts nest in dark places. So, nothing's going to find them. And so that was all exciting, but then they took it in turns to brood the eggs. Everything was looking really good until, oh no, it's not an until. Look, this is my note for this is tight squeeze, long wings. But then, disaster. At some point when one of them got off the nest, they knocked one of the eggs off. Can you see it down in the bottom right there? They wouldn't have realised they'd knocked it off. There was no way they could get it back into the nest form, so that egg wasn't going to survive. But there's still one left, so don't panic. Oh, they knocked that one out as well. So, Claire and her husband are now really in a bit of a quandary. Theoretically, there probably is time for them to rear some young before it gets really, really cold and autumny. And it is known that if swifts lose their eggs, they will breed again to replace that clutch. What did they do? Well, they waited till the swifts had gone hunting for food, and then Claire's husband shinned up the ladder and removed the non-viable eggs. Practice makes perfect. They tried again, they laid 2 eggs, and they hatched. And although it's almost impossible to see even when I know where it is, I think that little blob there is one that's already hatched. And the other egg hatched as well. And here's one of the babies. Now, isn't it lovely? But I think this is fantastic. I'm sure you all know that birds evolved from reptiles from way back in the time of the dinosaurs. And I think you can see their reptilian, almost dinosaur-like ancestry in that picture. Here's one of the adults with the 2 babies, very young, their eyes haven't opened yet. And then they get bigger, and you can see now they're losing their fluffy baby feathers and they're getting their proper feathers. these white stripes here are actually the coatings of the feathers. As the feathers emerge from the bird's body, they're covered in a material like chitin, like your fingernails are made out of, to protect the feathers as they're growing and emerging. And as they come out and the feathers then open out, the casing just drops off. So progress is being made. And here they are, they're fledglings. They're being fed a lot. Now, if you were a baby robin, or a baby blackbird, or a baby most birds, you at this point would be doing a bit of this. And then you'd be getting out of the nest and you'd be perching and going and practicing. You'd be building up your flight muscles. We know swifts can't do that because they can't get out of they can't walk out of the box, they can't perch on anything. But they do build up their flight muscles, and they do it like this. They bend their wings and they do press-ups. I'm not making this up. Might not be quite this regular, but it works. And eventually, this happens. They squeeze out of the box and away they fly. And that's it. They will probably just go to Africa. They might hang around for a little while. Of course, the two that I've got the pictures of, by the time they left, there weren't really any other swifts to migrate back to Africa with, but they, inherently know where to go, and off they went. And we hope they got there safely. But what an amazing story. And fancy, it's just amazing to be able to see that development. Now, before I retired, I taught at Kendrick School, right in the centre of Reading. And from our staff room, I could see this church. It's now called the Polish Church, Sacred Heart in Reading. And that lovely steeple, I got to choose which staff, I got to choose. I badgered everybody in my department to choose this staff room because I knew Swifts were nesting in there, and I could sit, my desk faced it, and I could see the Swifts, it was fantastic. And I used to love doing lessons outside in the gardens in the summer, and we'd be doing a little bit of Edward Thomas or and anything really. and the Swifts would come around. Oh, look, girls, more Swifts. It's all part of education. And then I came to school one day and my heart sank. There was scaffolding all the way up the steeple. And I thought, oh no, they're going to close off all the nest sites. What are we going to do? And then I found out that an organisation called Action for Swifts, and I think they're on my list as well, yeah, they're there too, they'd already been called in. The church authorities were happy to have the swifts still nesting there, but they didn't want pigeons and bats because they make a lot of poo. I can imagine with pigeons, but bats are lovely, but never mind. So what the Action for Swifts did was they made swift nest boxes. They made 24 of them, and they fitted them behind the louvers on the church steeple, and they blocked off the gaps in between so that the pigeons and the bats couldn't get in there and poo. And they're still there. Action for Swifts also has associated with them an organisation which I don't know if we've joined yet, but we should, and anybody can, called the Swift Local Network, which I'll mention more in a minute. So I was really impressed by this, and then I found out that there are places in Britain that are called Swift cities. Edinburgh, Bristol, Belfast and Oxford amongst them. And in these places, planning regulations have been changed so that new builds have got to have swift boxes or swift bricks in them. The government's argument is always everything to do with planning is to do with the local authorities. So if you want to have swift bricks in new builds, you've got to talk to your local authority. And I got thinking, and I thought, the Swift cities, eh? Reading's got Swifts. Maybe I could get going. I can make Reading into a Swift town. And then I thought, hang on a minute, Ailsa, there's only one of you and you're quite small. So I decided I'd start small. The roof on one of the buildings at Kendrick was being fixed, so I got some Swift nest boxes and put those up. And then I branched out, and I knew there was a certain street, Crescent Road in Tilehurst, where 3 houses had well-established swifts nesting in them. And the easiest way to get swifts to come and nest near you is if there are already swifts there. You know what I was saying about they like to nest colonial, blah, blah, blah. So I was just so lucky. 2 things happened. One was that the Berkshire Ornithological Club had got a grant to have swift boxes made, and anybody who lived in West Berkshire could have a free swift nest box. I'm really sorry, the money's run out. And the other thing was that the energy company, SSE, had this scheme whereby people who work for them could volunteer to do a day's work for the community, and I got them to bring their cherry picker. They weren't allowed to go up ladders. Health and safety, they could only use the cherry picker, so we could only put nest boxes where the cherry picker could reach. And in 2019, we put up 18 boxes. And that was my first Swift street. I've done a school, now I've done a street. And then in Hamilton Road in Reading, we did it again, and they came out and helped me. And while we were doing this, these 4 houses looked very similar, and we were doing one of the houses, and the lady who lived next door came home and she said, "Oh, what's going on here then? What are you doing?" So I said, "Oh, Swift nest boxes, Swift's rare help." Yeah. And she said, "Oh, can I have one?" Oh, I mentioned the word free as well. "Can I have one?" I said, yeah, do you want 2? So we put 2 up on there, so you can see this. They look lovely, they're nicely symmetrical. And then her neighbour came home and said, "Oh, what are you doing?" And I said, no, they're free boxes, and Swift need your help. Can I have some? So all 4 houses that were the same design got Swift nest boxes, and they've renamed their address. They now call themselves Swift Terrace, Hamilton Road. And then I was doing a project in Wargrave, and then COVID happened. So we had to put everything on hold. But in a gap in 2021, some lovely, SSE, the energy company, had to stop their project because of COVID restrictions. And look how high up he's had to go. It's really good if you can put your boxes under the overhang on a roof, just to shelter the birds from the weather a bit. But this lovely chap from Hampshire Swifts, and Hampshire Swifts is on this bit of paper as well. They do some brilliant things, and they used to come out and help people like Berkshire, but now they're so busy in Hampshire they can't, so I'm afraid we can't ask them directly for help, but their website and Facebook page have got great ideas on. Anyway, he came, he was amazing. He just ran up the ladder. He barely held the sides. He used the gutter as his toolbox, and he sort of balanced up there, just doing, amazing. Anyway, so that one worked, and then we put some on the St Nicholas Church Hall in Newbury. We thought we were going to be able to put them in the church tower, where the louvers are, because those louvers, so slitty windowy things, are perfect for Swifts getting in and out. But then the tower master, who's in charge of the bell ringing, decided he didn't want them there. But one day, I went for a little walk today, St Lawrence's Church, lovely louvers. Oh, I've got my eye on that. The Nature Discovery Centre, where that San Martin wall is, can you see, I put 5 up there in 2021, and the great tits have moved in. So what we've got to do is play Swift calls next year and see what happens. And then last year, we put some on Thiel Library. It's me. I got some put on Thiel Library and some at Thiel Green School. And so far, I've got 78 Swift nest boxes put up around Reading. I'm not sounding my own trumpet. I'm saying it's doable. If I can do that, how many? With all of your help. I tell you what, Hungerford's going to be bristling with them. And we can move out. We can do the whole of Bar. Well, maybe not immediately. Okay, so what are we looking for if you're thinking about whether or not there are Swifts nesting near you? I went for a little mooch last Friday, and these are buildings on the main street. So any building that's got these nice old tiles on that have got gaps in, they're always interesting. And if there's gaps between the roof and the wall, they're interesting. So if you don't have Swifts, you might have bats. And then on this building, and again, I don't know how clear it is, here there's a big hole in the wood there. That's brilliant for Swifts. There's probably a gap behind there. So if you're looking to see where there might be Swiss nesting, look for those little gaps high up between the roof and the wall. And if there's a little bit of poo just on the wall outside, that's quite a good sign as well. So that's where the adults have come in and out. Does anybody know of any nest sites at the moment in Hungerford? Excellent. That's good to know.
I think we've got some opposite as well.
And we've got some opposite.
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Oh, good. That is good. If you do know where there are some nest sites, or if you have screaming parties going around, please will you record them on the RSPB's Swift Mapper site. You can do it via the website, or you can download an app. And this is the UK's go-to recording place, and it's helping us to work out how many swifts we have and how many we're losing and how quickly. And records like that are absolutely vital. If you're going to persuade a government to change legislation, you can't just go along and say, oh, there aren't many swifts left. They'll say, where's your evidence? And you've got to have evidence. And this is where you put your evidence. And it's also brilliant if you know that there are swifts nesting somewhere and the owners, obviously not any lovely people like you, but maybe some anonymous company based somewhere anonymous, the owners want to refurbish it and fill in all the gaps, and you know swifts are nesting there, and you go to the developers and you say, oh, please don't build, don't do that, the swifts nest there. The developers will say, oh, no, it's fine, we've checked, we've had an ecologist report. They've got to get an ecologist to go and look at sites. Now, I don't want to be horrible about developers or indeed about ecological consultants, but if you do your survey in winter in a roof space and you're looking for nests, you won't find swift nests because they don't make nests. So you might say there are no birds' nests in here, and maybe you just don't know that much about swifts. You know, not all ecological consultants are swift nuts like me. So keep records, evidence is really good. And also, it's really good for encouraging other people. Now, this is the best time of year to be out and about looking for evidence. And it may be that a sort of general survey of Hungerford could be arranged where you get a couple of streets each and you go out with your mates and you've got a map of all the buildings. About an hour before sunset, 2 hours, it depends which book you read, hour and a half. This is when the adults are going to be coming back in to give the babies their last feed, and the screaming parties are going to be out. So if there's going to be activity, this is the best time for it. And you should be able to observe interesting things going on. So again, this is a job for somebody, you know, but I don't know Hungerford well enough to suggest areas that you could do, but definitely worth doing. And look at the town hall. Terrible photograph, I'm sorry, I'll take it into the sun. It's got louvers. That is just ready, isn't it? It's crying out to become the Swift Town Hungerford Town Hall. And look at this building, it's next to the town hall. It's a sign. I mentioned earlier that Action for Swifts has got this Swift local network. So when I started all my Swift work, I just thought it was me who was a bit, Swift mad. And then I found these people. We're everywhere. It's amazing. We are not alone. And the Swift Local Network is full of good ideas, full of support. This week they happen to be running, oh what a coincidence that we're here, Swift Awareness Week. So there was a fantastic article in The Guardian on Friday all about Swift nest bricks and about Hannah Bourne-Taylor's campaign. And there will be other things in the media about Swifts. So spread the word. Now, let's see what you can remember. It's quiz time. Anybody remember the Latin name for a swift and why it's called it? Apus apus, well done. Why apus apus?
No feet.
No feet. Excellent. In the life of an average swift, how far will it fly?
2 million miles.
You're a star, you're right. 2 million miles. What do swifts use spit for? Go on over there.
Making their nest.
Yeah, making their nest, well done. What's a swift's top speed?
69.3 miles an hour.
That's what you were going to say, isn't it? Yeah, 3. Well done. Where's the next one? Oh, when do swifts do press-ups on their wings? Oh, go on.
When they've, after they've hatched, to develop their wing strength.
Yeah, you're right. Yes. And how far does can a swift fly in a day-ish? Yeah, well, it's you remember when it's
200 miles?
when I was talking about them having to fly a long way to get food for the babies. 500 miles. They can do about well, probably more. Where do they like to nest? Hungerford. No, sorry. Whereabouts in Hungerford? What do they like? Hedges, bushes,
Nooks and crannies.
hang up, nooks and crannies in buildings. That's a nice one. And what do they eat? Yeah, insects, any little invertebrates that got swept up into the aerial soup. And what can you do to help?
No, you're not.
No mow, yeah, more insects. Right, and don't forget, let it bloom June, thigh high July, and all the rest of it. You can put swift nest boxes up, or insert swift nest bricks. I won't, because I know I've gone on for a long time, do the sound quiz. There we are. Oh, I will say thank you very much indeed for being such a lovely audience.
It's a long way, 2 million miles. It's too far.
If you put up the bricks, and supposing you've got the builder to take out a couple of bricks in your house and stick them up, do you have to put a sock in those, in the bricks as well? I mean, do you then have to find a man with a ladder in the autumn and say, can you get up there and put a sock in there?
That's a really good point, actually. Probably, yeah. That is one of the stumbling blocks. I have to be honest. It is a bit of a stumbling block that you need to be able somehow to block the holes.
With a ladder.
But swifts will turf out other birds, particularly house sparrows and starlings. So, throughout history, I think even Gilbert White was writing about,
Remember, have a brick that could perhaps reach from a window, open a window and do that.
Yeah, that's a possibility. But then you've got to be careful that you keep the window closed when the swifts are around, because it might fly in.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, what I'm thinking about is if I could get a long stick and sort of have the sock on the end of it, somehow kind of poke it like that and then wiggle it around.
Have a kind of stick where you pick up poo or something with it.
Yeah, with a nipper.
It has a
That's 5 metres long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, doesn't the John O'Gaunt School have a DT department? I think this is a project of making nest boxes and making sock stuffers.
You see, as Brian knows, he does.